Are you looking for a stamina DPS build that's fun to play, easy to pick up, and still does great damage? Then this Arcanist Assassin build is for you. This build provides plenty of buffs and debuffs, making it great for solo and group content. Hello everyone, I'm Rogue Fox, and in this video, I'm going to show you the Stamina Arcanist build that I personally use. Now, I will say before we get things started that I personally play for fun. I'm not really chasing the high numbers, so of course there are going to be builds out there that are going to put out way higher numbers than this build, but like I said, I mainly use this for solo and group content, and I get through everything just fine. So I just want to go ahead and put it out there, just so you know what you're getting into. Again, the point of this build is to be easy to play and still have fun while doing it, but at the same time, still putting out solid damage in your solo and group content. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. For this build, we'll be using Arcanist as the base, and then for the classes, we're going with Herald of the Tome, Soldier of Apocrypha, and then we are subclassing Curative Rune Forms out for Assassination. To get things started, what we're going to do is look at gear, and what I'm going to try to do is show you the progression that I made with my character personally. So I'm going to be starting with gear that you can get at level 1 as long as you have access to these areas. Then I'll get into my champion gear, and then at the end, I'll show the current setup I have when I do trials. For my level 1 gear, what I chose to use was Order's Wrath. So that is a craftable set that you can find in High Isle. And then I also use Tideborn Wildstalker. That is another craftable set that you can find in Solstice. And then for my other two pieces of gear, I chose Threads of War. That can be found in Westfield, and that is also a craftable set. So that's the nice part about this is, like I said, you can get started right away at level 1, assuming you do have a character already made that can go and craft these sets. If not, you can always join a guild and ask another guild member if they can craft these sets for you. But like I mentioned, since these are craftable sets, you don't have to go hunting them down in dungeons or anything like that. They can just be crafted right away at level 1, so you're already off to a great start. As far as the set pieces go, I'm going to go ahead and show you where I place all of them on the screen here. And all of this was made on ESO Hub, so I will post a link to this build in the description below so you can find it there. But let's quickly go over this. For the Tideborn set, I used it for my front bar, for my 2 daggers, my back bar, which is my greatsword, and then the jewelry. So that gives me the 5 set bonus there. For Order's Wrath, everything is going to be medium with divines and stamina enchantments. So I put that on the chest, the legs, the arms, the belt, and the shoes, and you'll see why in just a moment. And then for Threads of War, I also did medium divines with stamina enchantments on the shoulders and helmets. Moving on to the gear, once I hit level 50, because now I had access to monster sets, this is the setup that I went with. And I will say, first of all, that I didn't have the Velothi amulet right away, so if you don't have it, don't worry about it just yet, but definitely work towards getting it. I know those leads can be a pain, but I swapped out my Threads of War for a Slimecraw head, and I was using shoulders before I got the Velothi amulet, and then Tideboard stayed the same. But as you can see, what I ended up doing before my trial set was using a Slimecraw for the head. Order's Wrath didn't change at all, and the only change that happened with Tideborn was since I had the Velothi taking the spot of the necklace now, I needed to move that Tideborn to another piece, which is why I have the shoulders. So this is the gear set that I took into trials, and of course, once I started unlocking trial gear, I swapped out Order's Wrath for Ansel's. So this is the setup that I ended up switching to. Now, the reason for me choosing the gear that I did is because, one, like I mentioned in the beginning, Order's Wrath and Tideborn are craftable, so that made things very easy, even Threads of War. But as far as the stats go, Order's Wrath provides that critical chance, you get the weapon and spell damage, and then more critical, as you can see here on the screen. And then for Tideborn, you also gain more weapon and spell damage, more critical, you get penetration there once you have 4 pieces, and then what I like most is the 5-piece set bonus, where you get increased direct damage done to monsters by 12%. And for Threads of War, we are only using 2 pieces, so we are gaining that 2-piece set bonus of the extra penetration as well. Once we get the Velothi amulet, you can see that it adds 1,650 offensive penetration. It also increases our damage done to monsters by 15%, so that is going to stack with the Tideborn, which is doing 12%. And then we gain minor force at all times, increasing our critical damage done by 10%. However, we do reduce our light and heavy attack damage by 99%, which is fine because we are mainly focusing on using abilities, but we do use our heavy attacks to get some of our resources back, and then for light attacks, I mainly use that to stack my Relentless Focus. And then we have Slime Crawl, which gives us extra critical, so we are swapping out our Threads of War, which we were just getting penetration from, but with the Velothi Amulet, we're getting more penetration, plus more bonuses, and then with the Slime Crawl head, we are getting more critical from that. And then once we get the Ansel set from the Sanity's Edge trial, we lose a little bit of critical. We do get some of it back with 2 pieces, so you can see that there, but we also gain Minor Slayer at all times, increasing our damage done to dungeon, trial, and arena monsters by 5%. We also get more penetration, and then for the 5-piece bonus, we get damage done against monsters by 7%, so you can kind of see why I like this setup. So I'm pretty much stacking all the damage I can to monsters. So we have Tideborn with 12%, we have the Amulet with 15%, and then if we're in a dungeon, trial, or arena, we get 5% there, but we will always get this additional 7%, and then we have the chance for another 7% for 10 seconds if we interrupt an enemy. So this is why I use the gear that I do. Now that I've covered the gear, let's go ahead and move on to skills. So for the front bar, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the screen. What I use for my bar setup is Killer's Blade, Bloody Soul, Escalating Rune Blades, Pragmatic Fate Carver, Relentless Focus, and then Soul Harvest for the ultimate. Once we morph Assassin's Blade into Killer's Blade, it becomes a stamina ability, and then we also deal disease damage, and then it deals up to 400% more damage to enemies with less than 50% health, and then heals us for 2,399 health if the enemy dies within 2 seconds of being struck. Next, I use Bloody Soul, which is just a variation of Wield Soul, and we actually get that once we do our scribing quest, so there isn't a lot of change that needs to be made. What I chose to use was bleed damage, lingering torment, and then most important, breach. So I'm mainly using this ability for breach, but if you want to swap the other 2 around, that's totally up to you, but you do want to keep breach so we can apply that to enemies. Next on the list is Escalating Rune Blades. This is going to be the morph of Rune Blades, and this is my main spammable. I love just chucking these out. I get the range as well, so I chuck them out, and then you'll start noticing once you get the better gear that you'll start one-shotting a lot of the enemies in the overland content. So this is very nice to use, and then you're also generating Crux as well. After I'm done chucking my Rune Blades, I'll go ahead and follow it up with a green beam, which is Pragmatic Fate Carver, and casting Pragmatic Fate Carver consumes all Crux and increases damage done by 33%, and decreases cost by 16% per Crux spent. This ability is considered direct damage, and then with the morph, we gain a damage shield while channeling, and we also get immunity to interrupts while the shield is active. And then consuming Crux also reduces the cost. And then I'm using Relentless Focus. So I mainly use this for the buffs it provides, so when slotted on either bar you gain Major Prophecy and Major Savagery, increasing our spell and weapon damage critical rating by 2,629. And yes, we do generate stacks when we do light and heavy attacks, so we can fire an arrow that deals 4,183 disease damage, and we can heal for 33% of the damage dealt if we're in melee range, but mainly I am using it on the front bar for the buff, and then it's also on the front bar because it's also stacking for the passives with the other 2 assassination abilities slotted. And for my front bar ultimate, I'm going with Soul Harvest, which is a morph of Deathstroke, and then with this, we ravage an enemy with a spinning attack, dealing 3,718 magic damage, and increasing our damage against them by 20% for 8 seconds. This also afflicts the enemy with Major Defile, reducing their healing received and damage shield strength by 12%, and then while slotted on either bar, anytime you kill an enemy, you gain 10 ultimate. Moving on to the back bar, I'm going to start with my favorite, and that is Rune of the Colorless Pool. So this is going to be a morph of Rune of Eldritch Horror, and this is mainly for debuffs. So you can see here, this Undimensioned Phenomenon applies Minor Vulnerability and Minor Brittle for 20 seconds. So Minor Vulnerability is going to increase their damage taken by 5%, Minor Brittle is going to increase their critical damage taken by 10%, and then if used against a monster, which is what we're doing, the Paralyze lasts for 8 seconds, and this ability cannot be dodged. However, I will say it does not work on the bigger enemies as far as the stunning goes, but it will definitely work on the smaller ones, and then we're still applying Minor Vulnerability and Minor Brittle as well. Next, we have Resolving Vigor. This is going to be a morph of Vigor found in the Alliance War, specifically the Assault skill line, and this is going to be our source of healing. Since we swapped out Curative Rune Forms, which is the healing line for the Arcanist, and swapped it for Assassination, we do need a source of healing, and this is what I chose to go with. So with this, we let loose a Battle Cry, instilling ourselves with Resolve and Healing for 5,388 health over 5 seconds, and after casting, we gain minor resolve, increasing our physical and spell resistance by 2,974 for 20 seconds. And then the new effect of this is the heal over time now happens faster over a shorter duration, heals for more, and then increases our armor, but now only targets ourselves, which is fine because if we're doing this solo, we only want to heal ourselves anyways. Next, we have Recuperative Treatise, and this is going to be another buff for ourselves. So here it says we etch a series of runes onto our weapon that pulse with power once every 5 seconds. Each pulse enhances our class abilities, and striking an enemy with one deals an additional 1,161 magic damage, restores 600 magicka and stamina, and generates crux if we don't have any. And here's the buff. While slotted on either ability bar, we gain Major Brutality and Major Sorcery, increasing our weapon and spell damage by 20%. Next on the back bar is going to be Crux Weaver Armor, and this is going to give us a buff and also apply a debuff to the enemy. So if we take a look here, we forge a Defiant Runic Armor around ourselves, granting Major Resolve for 30 seconds, increasing our armor by 5,948. Now just a moment ago, we went over Resolving Vigor, that gives us Minor Resolve. So with these two abilities, we are stacking Major and Minor Resolve, which is very nice. And then while the armor persists, taking damage applies Minor Breach to the enemy, reducing the armor of your attacker by 2,974 for 6 seconds, and then blows against your armor also generate crux up to once every 5 seconds. So not only do we have Major and Minor Resolve taken care of, we also have Major and Minor Breach taken care of, because remember, the Bloody Soul on the front bar is going to apply Major Breach, and the Crux Weaver Armor is going to apply Minor Breach. And then we have Stampede, which is a two-handed ability and where our Greatsword comes into play. So we launch ourselves across the earth and smash an enemy, dealing 1,393 physical damage to them and all nearby enemies. This attack is always a critical strike. After reaching your target, you sunder the ground beneath you, dealing 319 physical damage to all enemies in the area every 1 second for 15 seconds. And then for the backbar ultimate, we have Tide King's Gaze, and this is what I like to use when there are a bunch of enemies around. It does say target enemy, but if we take a look at it here, it says that the beam rends asunder reality for 8 seconds that deals 1,151 magic damage to enemies within 5 meters every 0.5 seconds. The Scion's beam automatically follows the initial target and then hunts for a new one within 8 meters if that target is slain. So I use Soul Harvest for single targets, but like I said, if I want to hit a group with my ultimate, then I'll drop this one instead. Now that I've given you all the information, let me show you how I go through my rotation, and I'm not going to claim to be some expert at my rotation. I have a lot of work to do, and for this trial dummy, I actually got it yesterday and have only done 2 parses with it. So I'll go ahead and put up my numbers from yesterday, and like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there are builds out there that are going to do way more damage than what I'm doing. Of course, I can always be more efficient. That's something I need to dial in, but like I also mentioned, this has been getting me through all the content that I've been doing. So for the rotation, what I do is I buff with Crux Weaver, then Recuperative Treatise, and then I fly in with Stampede. I apply Rune of the Colorless Pools. I can buff if I want to. Then I switch to my front bar. I hit it with Bloody Soul to get that Major Breach, and then I kind of just start chucking Rune Blades like that to build up my Crux. Then I'll hit it with my Beam, and then I guess I should be light weaving in here as well to build up my Relentless Focus. So again, not the cleanest thing, and trying to play and explain it at the same time is a little bit difficult as well, but let me see if I can do that again. That, boom, boom, boom. Then I have my ultimate, so I'll hit it with that, hit it with Relentless Focus, and I should have had all those stacked up, but this is pretty much my rotation here, and then as the health drops to under 50%, I'll start working in Killer's Blade as well. So that is what I personally do for my rotation. Now that we've covered the skills, let's quickly go over the champion points, because depending on what level you're at, this is going to determine what you can actually apply in slot. But for sure, let's look at the slottables. So green, we're not really going to go over. That's kind of personal preference. But let's take a look at Warfare. And I believe Warfare starts right here at Precision. So we go with Precision, and then we move on to Fighting Finesse, which increases our critical damage and critical healing done by 4% per stage. So that maxes out at 8%. And then from here, we move on to the right, and then we put that into Piercing. And then we go up to this part of the tree, and then we slot Deadly Aim, which increases our damage done with single target attacks by 3% per stage for a max of 6% damage done. Then we have Master at Arms, increases your damage done with direct damage attacks by 3% per stage, again maxes out at 6%. And originally I did have Biting Aura slotted, but I realized that it only applied to Fate Carver, Stampede, and Tide King's Gaze. So right now I am playing around on using it with Backstabber, which increases your critical damage done by 2% per stage against enemies you are flanking for a max of 10% critical damage done. However, my thinking was if I'm playing solo, I'm pretty much going to be facing all of the enemies I'm attacking, so I think it would be pointless, but I'm going to play around with it and try it out. It does apply to all of the abilities that we use for attacking, and then another option we have is Wrathful Strike, so that's something you can try using instead. I haven't personally used it yet, but those are the options that we have. But for sure, I would say we want to go with Fighting Finesse, Deadly Aim, and Master at Arms. Moving on to Fitness, which is going to be the red. I'm trying to remember where this starts. I think it starts down here with Sprinter. So we have Sprinter, and then we need to fill this one in, so we put 8 points into Hasty to get things started. And then that allows us to go here to Hero's Vigor, which we definitely want the max health, so max that out if you can. But if you're trying to get your slottables, we want to go to Bloody Renewal here, which restores a total of 1500 stamina once it's maxed out. And then we go to the top left, and these aren't attached to anything. We can just go ahead and apply these. So Balanced Vitality, we get a max bonus of 1400 health, which is very nice. And then we have Fortified, that's going to boost our armor by 1731. And then we have Rejuvenation for the last slottable, which is going to increase our health, magicka, and stamina recovery by 90. And those are the champion points that I have slotted. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the list of buffs and debuffs everything applies. So this is going to include passives, but that's the nice part about ESO Hub and putting the build together there, is that it compiles all the buffs and debuffs into one spot. And one thing I didn't see on the list here is Major Breach, but we do know we're applying that as well because of Bloody Soul. And maybe because it's a scribe skill, it didn't show it on the buffs and debuffs list here, but we are also applying Major Breach as well. And as far as food goes, what I go with is Bewitched Sugar Skulls, and then for my potions, I don't have anything specific. I mainly, for the time being, just use the Crown Tri-Restoration Potions, and that is my Stamina Arcanist Assassin build. It's straightforward, reliable, and the goal of it was to get as many buffs and debuffs as possible, while still making everything useful, but without being overly complicated. So with that, I've used this in all different scenarios for solo and group content, and it has been working out great for me. Of course, you won't be chasing leaderboard parses, but you will have a build that's strong, comfortable to play, and easy to stick with long term. If this video helped you out, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe for more ESO builds and guides, and let me know in the comments what builds you're running. I'd love to hear what's working for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.